Um, don't just talk about it, visualize cross-functionality. And what do we mean by cross-functionality and T-shaped skills and teams and collaboration and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what I would like to talk with you about tonight. Disclaimer, this is the first time I've done a prezo like this in a non-in-person environment. Usually like to walk around and do stuff like that. So I'll avoid walking around because you'll lose sight of me if I do that. So I'll stop doing that and just dive right in. How about that? Hey, how about a plywood cake? So why do we have issues with cross-functionality anyway? Why are we even talking about this? And in large part perhaps, it's because those of us who are and have been engaged in developing products built out of software products, or anything to do with software-based technology, there's always a stack of layers involved in that. And it turns out that people tend to focus on one of those layers as their specialty. And traditionally, we didn't really talk to each other very much. Kind of, I'd put on my headphones and make sure the cube walls were nice and high, and I'll tell you when I'm done. Don't bother me in the meantime. And we all work that way. Well, if you've been at this game for a while, you can tell from various parts of hair color here that I've been at this game for a little while, and it just doesn't work out because we don't know what we aren't working together, so we end up producing a product that doesn't work together, and it's about as appetizing as a plywood cake. So we end up with these siloed skills. I am, and sometimes not by choice, I've always been very curious and wanted to learn new things along the way, but I had one particular job experience where I was hired as the C++ coder, programmer person, and that's what I was going to be forever. I managed to survive that for about 18 months. And then it was like, no, I have to be able to do other things. But that's the kind of thinking that leads to this extremely siloed, even the older term was pigeonhole. We don't have those pigeonhole things anymore. Nobody even knows what those are, but the same kind of thing. So why are there silos within a team? Well, partly the technology drives that, partly, but that's more a force of habit than any kind of physical reality out in the universe. One thing that influences organizations to focus on specialization is we think we're building Model Ts instead of engaged in complex knowledge work. So there's this still shockingly widespread belief that the best way to be efficient is to keep people as busy as possible all the time. And specialist work does produce that outcome. The problem is it doesn't produce any other outcome that's desirable generally. Utilization management of people, keeping people busy all the time, is an undesirable way of working, especially in the kinds of work that we're doing. So artifacts of thinking, habit, this is the way we've always done it, this is the way we're doing it, don't talk to me about new stuff, harump, grump, the old guy response. Territoriality, hey, this is my code, my part of the product, keep your fingers out of it. There's an element of, you might think there's a pride of ownership kind of thing there, but it's more of I'm building a fence around my little bailiwick, everybody stay out. And that's partly driven by FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which you probably, I don't know if anybody still reads Dilbert or reads the old classic Dilberts, but that's what Wally had. Wally had this, he was the only one who could interface with the mainframe in the special room with the chair and all that kind of nonsense. And he made sure no one else knew how to do it, because that to him gave him job security more than anything else. And there's a lot of that going around too, especially when things are changing. And then just lack of trust. Do we trust people we work with? Do we trust our organization? Yeah, all of those kinds of things can drive this silo mentality in thinking. So some symptoms, even if we're in a team environment, be more like a pseudo team than an actual collaborative agile team. Uneven workload during the course of, I'm using primarily Scrum terminology here, you can translate pretty easily from sprint to iteration or whatever you like to say. Uneven workload across team members. I mean, we should have a fairly balanced workload across people on the team during the course of this sprint, next sprint, every sprint. If we're siloed, we don't have that. There are going to be people who are really busy at the beginning and basically surfing the web for the last 2 or 3 days of the sprint, and other people who are not doing a whole lot at the beginning but are super busy at the end, and that's very undesirable. Drives people crazy, first of all. The other very common outcome is we don't finish. We're busy because in part we're optimizing for busyness. We're not optimizing for finishing. So we get that outcome. We don't finish work reliably, predictably, because that's not what we're focused on. In a software environment, we waste a lot of effort merging and integrating code. I had a particularly wonderful experience with merging code back when I used to work for a living instead of being a coach and trainer and stuff like that. When I used to write code, I was working at a place in Longmont that shall remain nameless, where we were all very siloed, even within, and we had silos within silos within silos. And so we'd have the same chunk of code checked out, 6, 7 different people working on it all at the same time, and then we get to merge it all back together. And it turns out I, unfortunately, was really, really good at merging. So I spent 3 solid weeks merging code. That was almost enough to convince me to do something else, which I did and eventually, but that was horrific. Oh, and one of the guys in our group, spent 3 months merging code. I mean, really? You're paying somebody $125,000 a year to merge freaking code? Please, isn't there a way we can avoid that? Oh, we're recording. Okay, well, at least I kept it fairly clean. Silos within the team that require handoffs. Every handoff is waste. The Lean principle tells us that handoffs are 100% waste. There's no value add to any handoff. So we need to avoid handoffs, minimize handoffs. Morale and motivation, give you a little taste of that from me. Lack of collaborative problem solving. When we get more eyes and brains on hard problems, we get better solutions than if we just say, oh, hey, you're the specialist, you figure it out. It's like, well, okay. Can I bounce this off anybody? No, nobody else has time. Sorry. You don't get to talk to anybody. And then this is my work, not our work. This is my work. I'll let you know when I'm done, and then we'll see whether the team succeeds or not. The final symptom, and sorry about the heavy bullet point slides, we're going to get off of these really quickly, is silence. When people aren't working together, they're not. The symptom of that is they're not communicating. And we humans communicate. Well, you can Slack, you can type stuff, but that's very, very low bandwidth communication. We need to talk. Silence is a symptom of these and other issues on a team. It also turns out that we end up tracking all kinds of weird stuff. This is an actual chart, and the actual chart title from an organization in the Chicago area where I was coaching a few years ago, and they called it the burnout chart because it was tracking individual hours, individual work, and the line going way up to the right is the actual hours expended, which exceeded every single sprint the hours available. Well, how can that be? Well, people just work too much, working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. That's how you get the burnout chart. Another thing that occurred at the same place, but with a different team, another of those organizations that shall remain nameless because actually they've done a lot better since, is we tend to write most pseudo-agile, even real agile teams, but most pseudo-agile teams and organizations do try to create user stories and write user stories to drive the creation of product. But when we're siloed, we end up with stories that are individually focused. So we can end up with weird stuff like tracking individual velocities on a team and the craziness and mayhem that leads to. So basically, I'm bombarding you with a massive set of dysfunctions that result directly from teams that are not cross-functional and where there are not T-shaped skills on the team. These seem like good ideas at the time. This tracking individual velocities, this seemed like a good idea at the time, just to figure out, well, who needs help? Well, who wants to be the person tagged as the one who needs help in a setting like that? Ugh. That's very uncomfortable and worse. And it can certainly be worse. So, what teamwork? What are we actually accomplishing? Why have we gotten into this situation? How have we gotten into it? And what it comes down to is we are lacking cross-functionality. So just a couple of definitions. I threw these together. These are my definitions. These aren't drawn from anywhere else, but I think hopefully you'll agree that they hit the point fairly well. So a cross-functional team. This is something that occurs primarily in the Agile space. So I'm calling it an Agile team that contains within its boundaries all the skills necessary to deliver complete working product in small increments without external dependencies. Okay, there's kind of the kicker right there, isn't it? So we don't just depend on subject matter experts all the time. Not that we can't call on a SME to help us out, but we're not constantly stuck because we have these dependencies on SMEs, stakeholders of various types, other parts of the organization. We can actually move as a team, as the Scrum metaphor of the rugby team. We can actually move as a team without being dependent on other teams or individuals. Whoops, we had a double click there somehow. My mouse is wearing out apparently. So cross-functional team. That's only half the story though. The other half is T-shaped skills. A T-shaped skill is basically, again, my definition, an individual member of an Agile team who possesses at least one deep, powerful skill set, something that is their area of expertise, that person's area of expertise. But, and this is the important part, whose skills spread beyond the boundaries of that one specialty. So instead of living in that C++ pigeonhole, got to branch out in order to, well, to be effective, in order to build great products, in order to work as a team, in order to get the benefits of teamwork. So cross-functional team, this is a modified version of a diagram that I use when I'm training, coaching, and other kind of things. The basic idea is the input is requests for stuff. And in Scrum, we call that list of stuff product backlog, widely used in other Agile frameworks as well. Product owner helps moderate, mediate, do a bunch of other stuff too, to get that product backlog ready for the team to work on, and then the team members, the developers, actually build the product. And notice that I've got these circles drawn pretty tightly without all sorts of arrows pointing in and out. The input is requests for stuff. The output is that stuff as working product. That's really where we want to be. That is the most effective approach to delivering product. And that's essentially the heart of agility when you get right down to it. T-shaped skills, this picture, cross-discipline skills. Actually, it's kind of, you almost flip it over because the cross-discipline skills, there's less expertise in those areas with that one that's really strong. So you could go either way with this, but this is the traditional way. It's an upside down T. It doesn't really look like a T anymore. So the metaphor gets lost. So you've got that one, at least one deep discipline expertise, whatever that might be. And then branching out, being able to do other things. What it really comes down to is being able to do not just your specialty, but being able to pitch in, help out, balance the load across your team, because you can do more than one thing, and other people on your team can do more than one thing, and all together, hooray, we're wonderful. We move fast, we're effective, we balance the load. No one person is wildly overburdened for either part of a sprint or an entire sprint. We produce product predictably, which gives the business the opportunity and the ability to forecast based on the data we generate. So there are many, many virtuous things that come from this. Things, that's not a great word. Many virtues that result from having a team that's cross-functional and populated by people with T-shaped skills. But what do we mean by this? So cross-functionality, the term that's been used for a long time is a cross-functional team. But there's a misinterpretation of that term. Ignore the T-shaped skills, just have a team of specialists. We have people whose knowledge and abilities don't cross over. So again, we're still basically just that internally siloed team. So a team of specialists is not a cross-functional team. That can be a hard one to understand and to measure. So that's where we're getting at, is the simple tool that allows you to visualize and measure to a greater or lesser extent cross-functionality and T-shaped skills. What we really want, and this is an older term, I haven't seen this used extensively of late, but yeah, I like old music and old terms as well. Generalizing specialists, that's what the T-shaped skill is all about. I specialize in this particular technology or practice or whatever it is, but I also have generalist knowledge and generalist curiosity. So I can learn new things. And for me, this always worked great personally, because I've always been curious about other things, other technologies, want to learn new stuff, in part just to relieve the boredom and monotony of doing the same thing over and over again. And if any of you have programmed C++, which is where most of my experience has been over the years, that will just make you crazy if you do too much of it. So you need a break. I needed a break. And so that's part of my motivation for when I first encountered Scrum in the early 2000s, really dove into that good and hard. On a team that's built with T-shaped people, people with T-shaped skills, everyone can contribute to a greater or lesser extent. We're not saying, and no one would ever really demand, I don't think, it wouldn't be reasonable to insist that everyone develop deep expertise in every single knowledge and skill area that a team needs to be effective. That's really not where we're going here. So this isn't an impractical setting, but it allows us all to contribute in whatever area the team currently needs help with. So if we're looking at our plan, and we look at the day of the sprint, whatever it is, and there's something that needs to be done, there's not just one person who can take on that one thing that's really important to do today. Multiple people can work on it, and even better, we work on it together. So we bring our core competencies, but we can do whatever is needed to achieve the team's collective goals, which helps us, again, break down so many of those areas of territoriality, the my work versus our work kind of thing. It all becomes our work because it is actually our work. We can all contribute to a greater or lesser extent to multiple areas. So why are we doing this? Well, I've kind of preceded myself here. I started talking about it first. From the perspective of the business, we can mitigate the risk of failure. We mitigate delivery risk. Since we're balancing the load across the team much more evenly than in a team of specialists or even a silo team, we are much more capable of delivering what we say we're going to deliver and being predictable. And it turns out predictability is one of the most important things. If we're in a team setting, we're building product or a service, whatever that might be, if we can do that at a predictable pace, we've won almost every battle already. It doesn't matter. It matters less how speedy we are at delivering. If we can do if we can forecast and meet our forecasts, we're well down the road toward being successful. How about that? I'll leave it at kind of at that. Optimize predictability. I really am not looking at these in advance. I'm just talking ahead of what I'm showing you. Maximizing teamwork and collaboration, which helps with people's motivation and morale, and getting to know each other. In the introduction, we're talking about icebreakers and getting to know people, learning more about your teammates. Well, that's a great way to do this. A great way to first kick off retrospectives and things like that, learn a little more about your teammates. But if you work with people every day, you really learn a lot more about them too. So those icebreakers do just that. They break the ice, but then we really learn about each other because we're working together. When we have a truly cross-functional team comprised of people with T-shaped skills, or planning and daily work management just becomes so much simpler. We don't have to take into consideration all these things about, oh, well, so-and-so's on vacation for the next 2 weeks. We can't do any of this kind of work. It's like, well, no, we can still do that kind of work. We may go a little slower. We'll take a smaller bite, but we can still do it. It just simplifies things so much. And daily planning, same kind of thing. reducing dependencies within our team and certainly outside of our team, because we can move as that rugby team. You know, rugby confuses the daylights out of me. I guess I'm a bad Scrum trainer because I don't understand rugby that well. When I watch it, it's just like they're running down the field and they run into each other and they're laying on the ground, and then somebody throws the ball up and they're laying on the ground. It's like, wait a minute, isn't that a tackle? No, I guess I don't. But anyway, what I do understand about it is, even though there are players who have different skills, some are speedier than others, some are bigger and bulkier than others, some can jump higher than others, and all of those kinds of things, but otherwise it's minimally specialized as a game. Anybody can carry the ball. Whatever player is open moves the ball down the field, and that is what we want on a Agile team as well. We want to be able to move. Whoever's available to move the ball forward, that's the person who should be able to do it. So we reduce those dependencies. We also, since we're optimizing for finishing, because we're working together, collaborating on delivering solutions, delivering product, we're increasing our team's throughput. We can actually get more done, especially when we work together, because we get the multiplier effect of multiple eyes and brains on hard problems. I was trying to explain pair programming to someone I was working with years ago. I won't go further into the story. This person was kind of extremely skeptical about that. That's a kind way to say it. And so I'm talking about, pair programming, swarming on problems and things like that. So, well, basically what you're telling me is you can pay 2 people to do one person's work. Like, well, no, actually. We're paying 2 people to do 3 or 4 people's work, because that's the effect that we get out of working together. And just, didn't make an impression. So, okay, that's fine. This is, it's time to move on. And we can grow our team because we're working together. We're learning how to be a team. It's one thing to get to know people kind of socially. Whether we do anything outside of work or not is not really a part of that conversation. We might not. I've have certainly worked with plenty of teams that they didn't really follow the we socialize after work model of a mature team, but and I don't certainly wouldn't discourage that, but I don't see that as I haven't seen that as a marker of a really mature team, because I've known people who socialized after work and they were a terrible team. I mean, they liked each other, but they were terrible when it came to doing the work. So how about if we focus on what happens during the day when we're working together, and how much do we work together, and how much do we appreciate working with each other? I think that's really where the core of it is. And we can go out and have fun, sure, but to me, that's really not the key indicator. So wait a minute, is your team truly cross-functional? Do you have people with T-shaped skills? Do you have skill gaps? How do you know? How do you know? It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to actually be able to identify where there are skill gaps. Do you have a team of specialists? Do you have people with current or emerging T-shaped skills? What have you got? And how can you encourage cross-functionality and T-shaped skills and understand what's happening over time, change over time on your team? Well, and measure T-shaped skills. Here we go. And I am kind of rocketing through this. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. Okay. Well, here we go. Sorry.
Do you want to be interrupted with questions, or just if you have questions in the chat, we'll tell you?
Questions anywhere. Actually, the chat went away when I started sharing.
Okay, we're watching it.
All right. So actually, yeah. Okay, good. Well.
So far, just praises.
Yeah.
Comments. Comments.
Great stuff.
Comments and complaints about Zoom, which that always happens. So it occurred to me some time ago, a few years ago, that really needed a way to visualize cross-functionality and T-shaped skills, and to be able to measure change over time, because really our team, we should be getting better at these kinds of things. We shouldn't be we shouldn't have a team that's just static in its ability to operate in our current state of T-shaped skills shouldn't be our end state. That's just a snapshot in time. And the same thing actually with our skill levels as well. So this is what I came up with. And the reason this occurred to me is I have a small background in radio frequency engineering. I'm not a trained double year RF engineer or anything like that, but I've been exposed to quite a few of these kinds of things. So there's this thing called a spectrograph, which is a visual display produced by a fancy, expensive instrument called a spectrum analyzer, which measures the signal strength of a radio signal across a segment of the RF spectrum. And the reason you need to do that is because you need to make sure your signal that you're transmitting, especially if you're transmitting a signal like a broadcaster or something like that, it needs to be a clean signal. It can't have what are called harmonics. It can't have the things that make music sound great, which are harmonics. You need to have a pure signal, because you have these spikes of signal down or up and down from your main signal. You're interfering with other broadcasters, making a mess out of things. So I looked at this and thought, hey, you know what? That's actually, a team could look like that, because you have that one big spike, and then what about those other skill sets people have? So what are your harmonics, I guess, would be the way to put it in RF engineering terms. So it's surprisingly, to me anyway, it's a shockingly simple idea. And I always tend toward the simple ideas. I don't know if that's what that says about me, but I don't like complex, excessively complex, obtuse kind of stuff. So you might wonder how I ever got into things like C and C++, because that's all those languages are about. Maybe this is the reaction that I generated over a couple of decades of using those tools. It's just a graph on the X or on the Y axis, just 0 to 10. That's your skill level. And this will be a self-evaluation. I mean, there's no objective measure going on here. Skill level 0. Java, sure, I'll have a cup, something like that. Oh, you mean it's a programming language? Of course, that's an ancient joke now. 10, I'm the master of the universe in whatever this skill area is. And then what are the skills needed to deliver whatever it is your team is currently working on? Of course, this can change over time as your team adopts new technologies, maybe moves to a different product, whatever that might be. So I've just got some examples down on the bottom, just some stuff I threw together, but notice, including some stuff like documentation. Do we have the ability to write Java, to create Java docs or printed, or what would be printed documentation back in the old day, automated testing, things like that. So draw the chart, draw the graph, pretty straightforward, and then people self-evaluate. So everybody gets a different color marker in real life. I used to do this on flip charts. So you have a whole pile of different markers, different color markers, at least one different color for each member of the team, and enough contrast that we can tell who's who, and then just start. So we start at 0 and go, oh, I do this really well. No, don't know anything about that. Don't know anything about that. Down at 0. Oh yeah, here I got another spike, however high that is. And just on that 0 to 10 scale, how do you rate your skills, your knowledge in this particular area of technology, or whatever it might be? So we do that, and then when we're done, take a picture. So I have an example here with, I think I've got it's a 7 by 7. I've got 7 skill sets and 7 people. That just was more or less accidental as I was looking at it. Okay, cool. Now we have a snapshot in time. We know where our team is at this particular point in terms of their skill sets and what kind of coverage we've got. So now we need to be able to understand some things about what we're seeing here. And this particular example has a serious problem, shows a serious problem on team, and we'll get to it here in just a second. Oops, come on. Okay, so here's the reference information for this. We're actually using data to generate insights. Do it every, I think 3 months is about right. We should be able to learn something quarterly, hopefully, in our team, focus on areas of weakness or areas that are risky because we don't have a lot of coverage with pairing or swarming. Shows us how to build cross-functionality, shows us that we are or are not building cross-functionality and T-shaped skills, but we can do that deliberately by deciding how we work, which if we don't have a guide to help us focus on building those T-shaped skills or filling in skill gaps, it's hard to understand what we should work on. When it's all just work, then it's all kind of equivalent, but this can help team members understand, oh yeah, we're weak in this area. We're really dependent on Dana for this particular type of work. We need to make sure that we are spreading her knowledge around the team so we're not stuck when she goes on vacation or whatever. And then watch for changes that indicate growth. That's what we'd love to see, or the other side of the coin, deterioration. Are we getting worse? So look for skill gaps. That would mean low or missing peaks. We have an area where nobody's got anything. Skill bottlenecks, a bunch of single peaks. That was the problem with that first example. And then look at the zero line. See what's going on with the zero line. So this example shows a team that is weak in 3 particular areas. Got a little bit, a couple of people have self-rated themselves at a 2 out of 10 in a couple of areas, and nobody wants to touch those docs. Nope, not doing it, not going there, not happening. But that's a problem because that's something that we are expected to deliver. So we either have an external dependency there, probably, or we're just not doing it, which can be an even bigger problem when it comes to things like automated test coverage, regression tests, stuff like that. Team of specialists, here we go. There's little actually there's no crossover. There's not a single T-shaped skill, at least that anyone will admit to, on this team. In a team environment, an agile environment, people don't have to be afraid to admit to things that they know how to do just because they don't like doing those things. So I once actually completely hid my ability to write stored procedures when I was working in a non-agile environment because I absolutely desperately hate writing stored procedures. Those of you who know what those are, you'll get it. Those of you who don't, consider yourself fortunate. Absolutely hate doing that. But I could do it, but this wasn't an agile environment, so it didn't matter. And then I got a better job where I was on a Scrum team. And there was this need. We had a DBA, but DBA was overloaded and often couldn't do the kind of tedious sorts of things like writing stored procedures. So it's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Don't ask me to do it every day, but yeah, I can fill in when that's needed. And on a typical siloed type environment, first of all, we wouldn't get that question. And secondly, I would never admit to anything that I didn't like doing because I'd get stuck doing that thing forever. So again, personal experience showing off here. So what's happening here? This is based on the previous diagram. This shows a team that's maturing its skill sets. Notice what's happening. There's more at the bottom. There's more stuff starting to move up, especially over on that left edge where the example is just Java dev, being able to write Java code. There's some people who say, yeah, I'm a 1. I can actually write hello world and make it work. Okay, yeah, that might be a 1, why not? And then, oh, hey, look at that. We have more and more colors on each of those skill sets, and the 0 line is starting not to be populated so heavily because people's skills are spreading. And then 4th one, this is where I'm going to stop it for examples. Look at that. There isn't a single person on this team that has absolutely 0 ability in any of these areas anymore. So over the course of, I think this was about a year.
Yeah.
Question?
She's soft, huh? She's all soft and cuddly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not sure what that is.
Eddie's probably out by now.
Okay. So this is where I'd like to see a team go. If I'm coaching an agile team, I really want them to be in this position where, I'm not an expert at several of these things, but you know what? I can do the basic stuff. I can kick in, I can fill in, I can do enough to keep us moving forward when we have a bottleneck or a vacation or, you know, whatever it might be, so that the whole team doesn't get stuck. Because when we're back in the team of specialists setting, one of those people is either overloaded or not present, we're stuck. We are not going to finish work that sprint that needs that specialty, whatever that might be. So if we're missing our DDA, guess what? We're not doing any of that work this sprint because we have nobody else who can do any of that kind of work. So how do we get there? Well, deliberately through pairing and swarming in areas of weakness, or even an area, just identify one, pick one that we've stumbled over before. My example was from experiences, the DBA example again. Dana's our DBA. Nobody else knows how to do this stuff. Therefore, Dana, would you agree not to ever work alone? You're always pairing with someone so that we can mitigate the risk. Oh, and you actually get to go on vacation. See, there's the payoff for Dana. She gets to go on vacation without having people ping her on her cell phone when we get stuck on things or, you know, be distracted. So there is a payoff for the specialists as well, but it has to be deliberate. We can't just, oh, it'll just happen. Not so much. Things that we don't focus on typically don't happen. So this is an approach that I have found helps us focus as a team on filling those skill gaps and deliberately building T-shaped skills. And I think this is where I can actually give you, if you would like, a chance to practice this particular technique. It's a little contrived because you're not with people you work with, probably. Well, maybe you are. What you decide to pick as the skill sets and, you know, who's on the team, that's a little contrived. And I don't know if we need to do that or not. So maybe we do some questions first. Oh,
Yeah.
KISS. Definition of KISS. Okay, yeah, looking at that. And here I thought they were just a rock band. A gaudy, and yes, rock band. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, a lot of great comments, but no questions yet.
Well, I have a question, and I think, Jen, you
Nice.
did touch on it a tiny bit. Just curious if you could expand a little bit on, you know, the less desirable something. For example, I had a team that, you know, had a QA, and everything would get really backlogged in the QA. And so I'm letting people know, like, hey, as a team, you guys, we need to stop everything and help the QA to QA things to get it out of that column, and we can go back to our development. And they were resistant, like they were in that frame of mind of, well, I've coded it, I've thrown it over the fence, and now it's you know, she's the one who's behind.
Right.
And so I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that, around just some of those items, or, you know, coding languages or whatever that, you know, or tasks that are like a little less desirable, and how to cross train.
Well, and that's the big example. I actually had that called out in one of the too many bullet points that I removed from this version of the presentation, since I'm trying to keep it a little shorter. I think the first time I did this, I had an hour and a half at a Scrum gathering somewhere or another. So I trimmed it down a little to fit in the time frame, but that's really the big one. The people who are busy at the beginning are usually the coders, and the people who are busy at the end, but not so busy up to that point, are the people who are labeled as testers on the team, or QA. And this is, it's a common, very significant problem. And that's really the big divide, and that over the wall kind of thinking too. That's a siloed mode of thinking right there. I mean, that's clearly anything we throw over the wall, over the fence, into another silo, that's a handoff siloed mode of thinking. So diverging a little bit from that, well, first off, I do have, oops, I'm in the wrong window. So what I would do is put a QA skill. QA testing is clearly a skill we need on our team. And if we have, you know, one person, maybe two people who have that skill set, as their T skill, then of course we're going to be stuck. And we're often going to get to the end of a sprint and not be done because not tested. And you know what? Testing's in our definition of done. We didn't meet it, we're not done. So what do we do about that? Well, I actually take a couple of different approaches. First of all, this one I think is really helpful. We need to identify where we have those dependencies, and maybe this tool can help identify those dependencies and just make them visual and visceral. Even though we observe something happening, that doesn't mean it's something that registers in our consciousness. So let's make it visible. Let's see that spike that doesn't have much coverage for QA. And then let's change the way we're working. How about that? So I have proposed and tried to enforce. You know, when you're coaching in an agile setting, you don't go around bossing people, telling them what to do and how to do it and all that kind of stuff. But oh, hey, you know, I see you're not finishing all the time, and the poor testers on the team, that 1 or 2 people, are trying to do basically 2 weeks worth of work in 2 days, and that's not working for them. And we all get the negative outcome of going to our sprint review and having to stand up in front of our stakeholders and executives and say, we got nothing done this time. I want to make sure that always happens too, because if they don't get that feedback, then there's no imperative, or not as much of an imperative to address the problem. So how can we fix this? Well, how about if we all work on one story until it's done? Nobody puts any work in flight on anything else until this first story is done, which means it's got to have its test plan, it's got to be tested, it's got to be approved by our product owner, again, using the Scrum approach to things. And then when we're done with that, we're going to have a little celebration, and then we get to start on the next story. Oh, but we'll go so slow. So now we need to think about lean a little bit. If you want to go fast, what do? Slow down, right? Slow down to go faster, because the saying's used everywhere. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So if we slow down, we'll actually get more done, which means we're going faster. Even though it seems like, oh, I'm terrified, I'm not busy. If I'm not busy, people are going to think I'm not doing anything. Well, get busy learning other skills. How about that? That's the approach I would take. And I have been in a couple of situations, Sherry, that were desperate enough where team had been working for 6 months and not finished anything, and they had this gigantic backlog of testing. And then, of course, when they got to the testing, most of the stuff didn't work because, of course, they didn't test it. And it's this funny thing about coding. You don't know if it's actually going to work until you test it. So maybe we need to change the formula a little bit. Yeah, so yeah, strict whip limits. There will be riots. Yes, indeed. Which is one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of Kanban, because the whip limits, nobody can live by whip limits. That's too strong of a statement. Most people can't live by whip limits. You can do one more thing, can't you? Oh yeah, but we've hit our whip limit. I don't care. Do this one more thing. Ay. Where does it end?
Well, I will say in this situation, I thought it was a great opportunity for the QA person, who was a quieter person on the team, but extremely diligent at her work, for her to train the rest of the team on what she does. And then it created visibility with the amount of work that goes into it. And then we had at least, at the minimum, 3 different sprints where we were calling on the rest of the team to help write test cases and to actually test things. And it was really great eye-opening experience for everybody. Just the team needed to experience the pain. That was the problem, is that they weren't feeling the pain. Right. They weren't up till 3 in.the.morning testing things.
Yeah. And so again, that creating that imperative, whether it's feeling the pain, whether it's work isn't finished, creating an imperative for change. Because most of us, we get comfortable in a routine and a way of working, and we don't want to disturb that too much, because we're comfortable in the way we're working, but it's wiping out some of our teammates. So that's not going to work for us. We need to clearly need to address those kinds of skill gaps. And again, we're called on to do things, and you want to be a good team player, which we think in general means, well, I'll do whatever it takes to help the team, complete their work. But whatever it takes has to have boundaries on it too. It can't just be, well, I have to do all this work in the last 2 days because nobody else is willing or able or interested even, and they don't even know. So yeah, not a great thing. And part of teaching people to be comfortable with discomfort, as Nancy, you typed that. Yeah, that's really an important thing as well. And we don't need to be afraid of being uncomfortable. It's not like the end of the world. It's just, yeah, this is a little uncomfortable. I don't really like this. The other argument that I have heard far too many times is, well, I coded this, I can't test it. And okay, true, yeah, that creates dysfunctions. But first of all, why was it only you coding it? First of all, why is it one person doing the work? Because that just leads to problems, leads to issues. We need multiple eyes and brains on hard problems like coding and testing. Those are hard things to do. So why don't we pair up? And secondly, let's bust out our XP toolbox and let's write the tests first and then write the code. Because then it doesn't matter who writes the tests. I can write the tests. As long as I'm capturing the intent in the test, then it doesn't matter who writes the code. The test is going to be very unforgiving about whether the code actually works or not. It's, we don't get partial credit. Computers are really binary like that. Your tests either fail or pass. And if they fail, you're not done. So let's figure that out. But even better, let's work together on that.
I also feel, and I'm not a developer by any means. I've done like a little bit of HTML by Googling stuff. So I don't have a lot of experience. However, with what I observed with this, situation was that if you can write test cases and you can test well, it's going to make you a better developer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you learn how to write the tests before you write the code. That will really enhance those development skills significantly. And then right there, that is removing some of the burden from the QA specialist, because in a lot of settings, the QA work really isn't unit test kind of stuff, line of code level testing. It's more in the realm of acceptance testing, functional testing, those kinds of things. So.
And you mentioned acceptance. It also makes them better at writing acceptance criteria.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We kind of have to, in a software environment, the humans have to learn kind of how to think in that binary mode, though we certainly want to be much more creative, but we do need to think in terms of how do we describe acceptance criteria, for example, in a way that is so unambiguous that it will be patently obvious whether we are passing or failing. And actually, if we hand that off to the computer, then we don't even have to think that way. If we can automate our acceptance testing, then the computer can be binary and we can be creative. I think that's a good balance right there.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curious, just thinking about this and something that came up with my teams recently, just during this odd time with the pandemic.
Yeah.
We actually have like technological issues right now with pairing because we don't have tools, because everybody's remote right now, and we don't have the technology, or they're not supporting getting technology that works well pairing remotely. So it's easy for everybody to just go off, working from home, go off and do your thing, and there's very little pairing happening. Yeah,
that's definitely a problem, and hopefully this is just an interruption we're experiencing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not so sure about that, but one thing that I found, so when I'm training, I have people work together just using Zoom. I just put them in breakout rooms or open up breakout rooms. Yeah. And those really shockingly work well,
Pretty well.
surprisingly well. And then if you can, you share a screen, you've got a virtual whiteboard, almost like being sort of
Yeah.
close, in person, almost sort of, kind of.
Almost, sort of, kind of.
It's a lot better than no communication at all. And it's a lot better than Slack. Slack to me, it gets so noisy. If I need to work with someone, I only want to hear that one other voice. I don't want to hear or be distracted by everybody else's chatter. So that's kind of the breakout room that we used to do when we were in person. Go into the room with the whiteboard, a couple of laptops, and we'll work it out there. And that's actually a reasonable technological metaphor. I don't know about other tools. I've really only used Zoom. I latched onto it right away when it didn't work very well. It's like, oh, well, now it works better. So yeah, cool. And I haven't found the need for anything else, anything more complex. Maybe that again is coming back to my focus on the simplest thing that could possibly work.
Yeah.
The simplest thing that meets the need, I think, is a better way of putting that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Well, let's see. Got just looking around, 25 people in here. So what we could do, what I would like to show you, I put together, so I don't know where you want the presentation to go afterwards, Nancy.
Yeah, we're not, so the recording will be on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that I don't think we can upload slides or anything any longer. Is Maria on? Sherry, you would know too.
Right, but we can post in the Meetup the link for the Dropbox here.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so you have a Dropbox.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I did is, and those of you who are interested in this, what I'd like to do, oops, I hit the wrong thing. I want to show you that in a minute. I want to be over here. That's just a link to a Google document. It's got I'll flip the share. It's just a Google Doc. There's a link to the PDF of the presentation.
Oh, great.
Anybody who's interested. And I created a whole bunch of these spreadsheets, and I didn't know if we were going to do these here or if anybody's even interested. If you're interested, of course, we can break to do that. Come on, load up. Here we go. So there's 2 tabs in these. There's the example, which if it ever loads, good grief. So I just contrived an example here. It's based on I've got 7 skills and 7 people. You can modify the chart area. I've got these weird zeros here because that makes the chart start at 0 and go up like you would do on a whiteboard instead of starting at the top and going down and making it look really weird. The blank sheet is preset and just ready to go. So fill in skills, fill in names, remove, delete rows and columns that you don't want, and it will build the thing for you. So you can just go like this.
Oh, wow. That's great.
It's kind of a simple sort of thing. And you can, one nice thing about the automated tools is you can change the type of chart. You can make it look like anything you want. Instead of having it hand drawn, you can do, you can get really creative. You can do all kinds of weird stuff. Whatever makes it work for you. So I just put a bunch of those up there. Of course, you can download the Google Sheets in, there's several different formats you can use. Wherever download went, there it is. A whole bunch of different formats that you can use. So those are pre-built and they're linked on the page here. I put together 10 of them, I don't know, whatever. If you want to use those, you being the collective you, so I had to learn this. A friend of mine moved to Texas and I was saying y'all as meaning plural. That's singular in Texas. It's all y'all if you're talking to a group. So that I had to learn that. I had to learn how to say that correctly because I used to do some work in Dallas and Austin and places like that. So that's the story. What do we got? We already kind of did the reflections and insights. What do you got? Anything else? I'm seeing some nice things here. Yeah, and the sheets, you're welcome to those. Please take them, modify them, do whatever. And in this current strange, maybe it won't be strange to us in 5 years, this world we're living in now. Hopefully we can get back to something more like what we used to remember. But this actually works pretty well for distributed or just when we're dispersed, because it's provides immediate visual feedback. First of all, that's kind of nice. And it doesn't rely on people drawing with their finger or a mouse on a virtual flip chart, which I don't know about any of you, but I cannot do that. It just doesn't work. It looks like gibberish. We have chickens, and our chicken scratching is more meaningful than the stuff that I produce and those kinds of things. So anything else? Any other thoughts, questions? Anything anybody wants to say?
I know what I'm doing with my teams later this week.
Oh, cool.
That's great.
Well, so do please let me know if you find this useful. I'd just love to hear from you. You don't have to disclose. I mean, just say, hey, that worked, or not so much. Any of you, all y'all, whatever you've got to say, I'd love to hear it. In the slideshow, I've got my email address, first and last slide. Anything else? All right. Well, I know it's been a little while, but I have dedicated this presentation to Jean. Yeah, she was my mentor and friend, and I miss her. So thank you. Thank you very much.